Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bios and Bookmarks, Season 8, Episode 4. It's good to see you here. I am Shivani Ramalochan, Bios and Bookmarks Project Manager, and it is my great delight today to be joined by a Bios and Bookmarks first, actually, our first Caribbean romance author, N.G. Peltier, also called Natalie. Natalie, welcome to Bios and Bookmarks.
Hello. I
It's really great to have you here. Let me tell you a bit about Natalie before we invite her to read. She is an anime watching, book reading, video game playing, story writing kind of girl, according to her own description of herself. A devourer of words and books from a young age, Natalie enjoys writing romance and creeping people out with the Caribbean folklore stories she grew up hearing. Trinidadian born and raised, she currently lives in Trinidad with her mountain of ideas and characters battling each other for whose story gets told next. She is represented by Lauren Abramo of Distal, Goderich, and Barrett, LLC. Natalie is the author of the extremely popular Island Bites romance series, currently standing at 2 books into the series. Sweet Hand was the first, and it has recently been followed up by Don't Go Baking My Heart, which Natalie will share with us from today. As you all know, this season's theme is the complexity of Caribbean love, where we've been exploring how writers both living in the Caribbean and its diaspora navigate all human connections: romantic, spiritual, carnal, social, political, and various entanglements of these. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Natalie to share her first reading from Don't Go Baking My Heart.
thank you, Shivani. So I am going to read from chapter one. This introduces our hero Devon, and I just think it gives you a good grasp of who he is as a person. So, chapter one, August, Devon. Devon King didn't like anything that derailed his daily plans. He knew, of course, that in business it paid to be prepared for the unplanned. Be proactive rather than reactive. But there was nothing that could have prepared him for this meeting so early on a Monday morning. He stared around the crowded conference room, the excited chatter the equivalent to the screech of nails on a chalkboard. It wouldn't bother him so much if everyone was this hyped up about something work related. Hell, there were enough projects in the pipeline for that. But the block letters on the whiteboard made him frown harder. First annual company bake-off competition. Dax Jenkins, the CEO of the architectural design firm, tapped the board. All right, everyone. I know we're all excited, but simmer for a sec. Devon glared at the board. There was even a lopsided cake drawn next to the words. This was the reason for the buzz. Devon wanted to storm out and go lock himself in his office to get some actual work done. They had shit to do, and his boss had called everyone together to talk about some bake off. How ludicrous. If everyone was in this room, then who was manning the phones? The thought of potential clients getting irate because they couldn't reach anyone didn't sit right with him. No one else seemed to give a damn though. Everyone's attention was on Dax and the words on the board. The incessant buzzing was enough to make Devon want to scream. But then the focus would shift to him. He didn't need that. He crossed his arms over his chest, waiting for Dax to explain what the hell all this was about. When he entered the building this morning, he was greeted by several choruses of Happy Monday, sung loudly by his coworkers. He hadn't appreciated their attempts to add some cheer to the start of the week and had, in fact, ignored the exuberant thumbs up and the multitude of cliched motivational quotes they tried to send his way. He didn't need shouts of carpe diem to actually seize his day. He did that on a daily basis instead of ambushing his coworkers with nonsense. Devon had barely settled down to get started on work when this alert from Dax had gone out with no prior notice of a planned meeting. Not that he could have refused his boss's request. He simply wished there had been some heads up. He would have shifted his schedule around to suit. So now everything was being thrown off. He could have been sifting through important emails right now. He had already suffered through everyone being way too laid back last week due to the country's emancipation holiday. No matter that August 1st had fallen on Wednesday, his coworkers had kept their laissez-faire attitudes right through Friday, acting as if they had an extended long weekend, using the fact that schools were closed for vacation period as an excuse. There were a few people on vacation right now, so they could be with their children, and yet there had been those who didn't have children rolling into the office late on a Thursday morning, as if that was okay. And now this. Who had time to waste on some bake-off when real work had to be done? Obviously, he couldn't simply leave, not when everyone was here on Dax's orders. He tried to look less like he'd rather be anywhere else and forced his hands into a relaxed drape across his lap. Hopefully, he succeeded in schooling his scowl to something that resembled casual indifference. Dax had a knack for sniffing out people's true feelings. He didn't know how the man did it, but Devon couldn't afford to be called out for being less than enthusiastic about all of this. Not that anyone expected him to be, but it didn't hurt to look like he was paying attention. It certainly wouldn't work in his favor if he pulled out his phone and proceeded to check his emails from here. If his intern, well, former intern now, Kim, was still here, she'd poke him in the side and tell him to fix his face. But Kim was back in London for school, and there wasn't anyone to keep his expressions in check. He actually missed the kid. Kim had been an exceptional intern who was irreplaceable in his estimation. Dax had been hinting that Devon needed to choose a replacement soon. But Devon wasn't sold on the idea. He had been stalling on shortlisting candidates based on the applications received. He would have to buckle down and do it before Dax got on his ass again. Kim had set the bar so high, he couldn't envision anyone else working to his standards. Devon knew he could be a bit of a hard ass and that his ornery ways, as Kim had put it, could scare anyone off. He didn't have time to placate some new person's hurt feelings. Whoever he eventually chose would just have to adapt to his persona. In spite of wanting to be back at his desk, getting some real work done, he remained seated and quiet. Dax was always a jovial man, quick to smile, but underneath all that was a sharp mind, always cooking up some scheme to motivate his employees. It was great that their leader took the time to care about all of that, but Devon couldn't see how this was going to help any of them. Trying to look less annoyed by this entire disturbance of his morning was getting harder by the second. So, as I mentioned a bit ago, we've decided to do a bake-off this year. We'll still have the sports day next year, but after the success of the Building an Appetite initiative, spearheaded by Devon and his intern Kim, I got to thinking, and well, you all know I love my belly, so it was no brainer that we come up with something a little different this year. Damn it. This ridiculous idea had sprung from that, and we like everyone to participate if possible, Dax continued, gaze fixed on Devon for a few seconds before he moved on to someone else. Had that been a coincidence, or was Dax sending him a not so subtle message? Devon was infamous for not taking part in company extracurricular activities. If it was work related, he was there 100%. Sometimes Dax joked about Devon's antisocial behavior, but had Dax been noting every time Devon refused to join some waste of time event? He didn't hang out with his coworkers after work or get heavily involved in the annual events like the sports day. He didn't see the point. He was here to work, not to make friends, friendship bracelets, and bond. The bracelets had been an actual venture suggested by one of his colleagues. Devon could still recall Evans' excited yapping about it. What self respecting grown ass adult walked around with embroidered bracelets? In Devon's estimation, there were way better ideas to boost morale than sporting a bracelet with supposed motivational words and phrases. Evan had never forgiven Devon's very vocal shutdown of the ridiculous idea. Or so he assumed, since Evan didn't try to be friendly with Devon so much anymore, which was exactly what Devon wanted. Sure, organizational health was important. The darn survey that HR had started sending out showed that employees wanted more company extracurricular activities. But Devon didn't need to personally involve himself in any of them. He spied Evan, one row over from him, eyes riveted to the board. Of course, he'd be all for something like this. Evan was a champion of upping employee engagement. He was constantly trying to outdo HR and whatever ideas they came up with. There was too much work to be done to stop for cake and ice cream in the lunchroom, afterward karaoke, or whatever the shit he concocted in that mind of his. As head of the staff club, there was always an email from him about some new and exciting thing he wanted employees to be a part of. Devon had created a separate folder for emails from Evan, and he barely looked at them. He didn't need his inbox cluttered with Evan's ideas. His inbox wasn't an out of control dumpster fire, and he was proud of that. Belting out a song on the office rooftop that they shared with the other companies in the building wasn't going to get his work done faster. No, it would most likely give his coworkers a good laugh at his expense. His voice wasn't anything to swoon over, and while he could carry a tune better than his brother Kieran, performing wasn't something Devon would ever be up for. His father lamented all the time on how Devon should do something with his voice, considering his father was a well known in the music industry, and his brother was becoming more sought after every day as a producer in his own right. Devon didn't give a single damn about any of that. He was right where he wanted to be. Well, in general, not currently. He definitely didn't want to be in this room right now. The number of emails he had to address, the details of the big project he needed to nail down the proposal for, were way too much. Maybe he should get back to looking at those applications. He truly did need someone to help him. He was a champion at organization, but even he could admit Kim had made a real impact while she was here. He needed an actual full time assistant. He didn't think anyone could measure up to Kim, but if he could find a candidate who could take direction well, maybe he could shape them into someone good enough that he might keep them around on a permanent basis. How did Dax even think they had time for any of this? Since the idea is inspired by that, Devon should sign up first, no? Evan's annoying voice rang out, and all eyes turned to Devon. Devon ignored the stares, cutting his eyes over to Evan, who wore one of his shit eating grins. I don't have the time. Simple, a factual statement. He couldn't be taken to task for that, could he? Getting work done that could add to the company's bottom line should take priority. I mean, we're all busy, but we're willing to make the time, aren't we? Showing we're all in at Dax Designs isn't just about the technical work, but camaraderie too. Evan was laying it all on a little thick, but Devon could see others. He turned to look at Dax, who was watching them, amusement dancing in his eyes. Dax would never force any of them to participate, but this sort of thing was something their boss loved. A sheet of paper slid in front of him, and Devon glanced towards the woman who held her pen out. He's not wrong, she said, voice lowered so her words remained between them. I'd suggest being the first to sign up. It would look good and make Dax and the board see you're committed to being a team player. Devon blinked at Dax's executive assistant, Amanda. She didn't seem to be joking, but he couldn't usually tell. Amanda always had a look of concentration on her face from holding Dax's entire schedule in her head and her devices, so Devon wasn't surprised. The woman was a miracle worker I could sweet talk anyone into anything when it came to getting stuff done for their boss. But she couldn't be serious about this. I'm a team player. She nodded. Of course, but trust me, Devon. Your definition of team player and Dax's are vastly different. Dax prides himself on his work and play balance. I know you're angling for a principal position, and being more involved in things like this will go a long way. I've worked closely with Dax for years. You know I know the man. Shit. Had Dax mentioned something to Amanda in passing? Devon had been working his ass off to achieve his career goals. He thought he'd been on the right track with his plans. He was determined to earn a coveted spot as a partner of the firm before he turned 40. He had an entire spreadsheet dedicated to keeping track of his goals. He was serious about charting his progression. But could participation in this bake-off really give him a leg up with a promotion? And that is the end of my first reading.
Thank you so much for that, Natalie. It's an intense joy to hear a writer bring their own work to life. Natalie shared with us just before we went live that she is very new to the world of reading her own work out loud for an audience, which you would never guess based on that reading. So
Thank you.
thank you again. It was truly a delight. I felt as I were in the room seeing the drama unfold. And drama is probably a common word when it's applied to romance novels, but I think in the Island Bites series, and in this book in particular, any drama you find on the page is extremely well earned, which is that it never feels gratuitous. It feels exactly like it could be happening to any one of us in real life, in our real Trinidadian lives. So, my first question for you, Natalie, is
Mhm.
perhaps a self indulgent one because I'm very curious about the answer. And it is quite simply not just why writing, but why writing romance?
Um, well, romance is actually most of what I read. And the first romance book I ever discovered was a Mills and Moons book at my grandmother's house. It was literally falling apart in pieces. The cover was off. It was basically tattered. Because I'm usually, when I was small, I've always been an avid reader, and then just found this book. So I'm like, all right, let's read this. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. So I've been reading it for years, and then I've been, dabbling in my own little writing on the side. And because that's most of what I read, that's kind of how I got into writing it. Because even though I am working on other stuff that's not, I guess, primarily romance, there's a romance in it. So I can't get away from, putting in a romance somewhere because that's what I like to read. Because even when I'm reading fantasy books or thrillers or something, I'm like, okay, when is the romance gonna happen? When is that coming? So
I think that's one of the best and most honest answers we've ever gotten on this show. Not that all our past guests have been dishonest, far from it, but I think you're speaking to something that so many of us can relate to, whether we write or we read or do a combination of both, which is that it's deeply enjoyable to
yep.
put more of the creative work into the world that you enjoy consuming as a reader first. And these two books in the series are exactly that. They're such a pleasure to spend time with. There is a way in which a lot of people who maybe take themselves too seriously think of romance writing as simply a beach read, something to pass the time without too much mental involvement. But I would argue that in this series, you can really enjoy the world that you've created, which is full of romance and also high stakes and intrigue and definitely bacchanal. And also see that there's a great deal of talent in the writing and that there's intense craft and care for the situations that these characters find themselves in. And did it feel apparent to you when you'd finished Sweet Hand who the main characters in Don't Go Baking My Heart would be? What was it about these two that really felt compelling enough to you to tell their story next?
Well, funny you should ask that because actually, Devon and Reverie was not originally supposed to be book two. I had planned them as book three and had a different pairing in mind for book two. But then I was like, all right, I need book two will marinate and I had to figure out what am I doing exactly with them. And I was like, all right, Devon and Reba, you're up, it's your turn. And then when I made that decision, it was like, all right, they were just my focus completely. Um, and yeah, his story just kind of flowed out of me because I love reading books where the two people are so opposite. And you're like, how is this going to work? They are so different. And that is this book. Devon is a Virgo. Reba is a Libra. Reba doesn't do plans. Devon has full spreadsheets and lists. He's a very serious person. Reba isn't super serious. She just goes with the flow. She's loud. She's spontaneous. So he's like, who is this person? And why do I now have to, unfortunately work with her towards this common goal because I'm desperate and I have nobody else to ask, right? So I had a lot of fun writing these two. And I've said this in other interviews. Don't Go Baking My Heart is my favorite thus far out of the two. Not that I don't love Kieran and Sharice. Those are my babies. They were, the first ones. But yeah, Reba and Devon just kind of took over for me because I had so much fun writing them. Really had a good time writing these two.
It really shows. I mean, they're both unforgettable characters. Devon is, at first anyway, exactly the kind of person you would think you couldn't spend more than 5 minutes in a room with. Like a totally overbearing, difficult personality. But in the way that you contrast his interactions with Reba, who is the definition of a free spirit, you really show the readers how that connection between two people, where they bring out things that, yes, infuriate the other, but also over time show each other how good they can be together as friends, then as lovers, and perhaps as more or as both. I think that comes across so well in Don't Go Baking My Heart. I think there are moments in which you think, I'm never going to like this person. But as a writer, I feel like you worked really hard to show why Devon is the way he is. And across both books so far, you've really spent a lot of time and effort showing how complex Caribbean masculinity can be. That Trinidadian men are just not cookie cutters or one type of person, and that they are deeply complex and rich individuals in their own right. I mean, how important did it feel to you to bring that across on the page?
Well, I am so glad you caught that and you pointed that out because it is very important because with book one in particular, Sweet Hand, I wanted to show Kieran in like vulnerable moments because a lot of times we know here in the Caribbean, people say, well, boys cry, men don't cry, or whatever. But I did have Kieran show that vulnerable side of him in book one. And as you said, like Devon does come across as this person who's like, okay, I don't think I'm gonna get on with this guy. But then you show, or you see rather, with his interactions with Reba, it's like, okay, yeah, he's still kind of set in his ways, but she's kind of bringing out another side to him that even he himself didn't realize he had. So you're right in what you said. They do bring out sides of each other that maybe they need because yeah, Reba is this free spirit and she's had people tell her she's too much, she needs to tone it down all of her life. And Devon doesn't want her necessarily to tone it down, but he makes her realize, hey, maybe I do need to have plans for some things in my life, and maybe having some kind of plan is not a bad thing. and I don't have to sacrifice my spontaneity just to do that. So I could kind of strike a balance for. So so yeah, I really wanted to show those different sides, and that even though the heroes as well as the heroines, have their flaws, these are real people. This is how real life is. There's nobody that's perfect. We all have our flaws, It's all good and bad in people.
I mean,
So
as you say, this is the best romance writing, I think, is a reflection of real life. Even when it's historical or it's fantasy or when it's solidly contemporary, like yours is. And for our viewers who may not know a lot about the romance writing world, it is, I think, a heavily disciplined world because it's defined by a lot of writing tropes. And serious romance readers, will be looking out for certain tropes. So if a romance book devotes itself to one or more tropes, readers will be expecting to see some of those fulfilled. For example, in Don't Go Baking My Heart, the idea slash trope of opposites attract is incredibly important. But I think what Natalie does is, yes, to utilize the trope and to fulfill it, but also to have fun with it, to sometimes subvert the expectations around what a writing trope should do. So, Natalie, in your journey so far as a romance writer, have you found these tropes useful? Do you ever feel like they hold you back? Or do you look at them and think, I could really have some fun with this?
no, I don't think these tropes hold me back. I think it's the last one you said. Definitely have fun with it because there will be, let's say, there are four romance writers who write a book that has the same trope, and they are four very completely different books. Each of us could have a different spin on the opposites attract trope or the there's only one bed trope. So I personally like having fun with tropes. Um, yeah, because I read different books that have different tropes in them. I mean, there'll be certain ones that I like reading all the time, like enemies to lovers is one of
Hmm.
them. Of course, the opposites attract. That's why I write them because I like to write the tropes that I like reading as well. But I mean, of course, I would want to probably challenge myself to probably write a trope that I might necessarily read. But yeah, I just think they're a way to have fun. I personally don't find them limiting because you could do so much. Different people could do so many different things with the same theme or trope, really. So it's just up to the author how you see it or try to interpret it, basically.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to approach it. And a lot of what of writers who may or may not consider themselves to be quote unquote more serious often fail to realize is that all writing is defined by tropes, even that which considers itself highbrow literary stuff. The tropes are in
Yes,
there. We
yes,
gravitate towards the same thing as
cor-
readers over and over again.
correct. You just call them a theme instead of a trope, but it's literally the same thing. It's literally the same thing. You use a different name. Mhm.
Yes, and when we're writing about love or reading about love, since the season of bios and bookmarks, we're thinking a lot about love and the ways in which Caribbean love in particular can be complex, but also rewarding. It's true that when you love someone, you are, and in whatever configuration that love appears, whether it's, as in these books, primarily romantic, but also familial. You are opening your heart to a certain level of risk. And I think across both books, and particularly in the ways in which you do it in this one, you show how much risk is involved in really giving your heart to someone, particularly in the way that Devon, across the course of the book, allows himself to open up more and more to who Reba is as a person, to the way in which she sees the world and her place
Mhm.
in it, and to what he could possibly learn from her, which I think is a value of human interconnectivity that transcends romance, or certainly includes romance and is just key to how we interact in the world. Did you ever feel This is probably going to sound a little bit funny. Did you ever feel sorry for Devon in this process or empathize with him more than Reba?
I mean, I don't know if I no, I did not feel sorry because I like making my characters suffer a little bit. I had way too much fun putting these two together into the situations where I knew for a fact that it was gonna be like, what is happening? I don't want to do this. Why is this person in my space? Because there's a scene in the book where, of course, I don't want to spoil too much, but where they meet up for their first baking session, and she just shows up. I mean, of course, she has pink hair, as with on the front cover, she has pink hair, and she's just all in his face, and she's just too colorful and bright. And Devon, in true Devon fashion, his style and how his house look is literally monochromatic, right? He doesn't have pops of color all over his house. So literally, Reba is the rainbow that has just entered, and he's like, I don't want this here. Why are you again? I am just the author cackling in the background, like, how can I make this even more worse? How can I make this even worse for Devon? Where he's like, please, I just want her to leave and get out. But yet at the same time, I'm attracted to her and I don't want this. You know? So
I
no,
feel like we're getting so many honest gems from you. It's great.
I did not feel sorry for them, and I don't really ever feel sorry for my characters because I want them to be put in these situations where they're like, God, no, no, I don't want this to happen. I don't want this, but yet I kind of want it, but I don't want to admit that I want it. You know? So no,
You know,
no,
one
no.
thing I found,
I had way too much
sorry,
fun
go
with that.
ahead.
Oh, no, I was just reiterating that I had way too much fun making that one suffer.
It's a lot of fun to read. And one thing I found remarkable across both books is that in the world of romance, there's often a clear distinction between the happy ever after ending and the happy for now ending. And I think quite a lot of contemporary writers in particular lean towards the latter, the idea that we don't know what the future will hold exactly, but that these two people, when we leave them at the end of the book, are committed to making it work for the short term, the medium term, the long term, with both Charisse and Kieran in Sweet Hand, and then with Devon and Reba in Don't Go Breaking My Heart, I got the strong impression that both couples will face challenges, but that they're committed to sticking by each other's sides. So, I suppose this question for you is both as a romance reader and as a writer. Do you feel more drawn to the happy ever after trope or the happy for now trope in what you prefer to read and then how you choose to write?
No, I don't think I prefer either one because how I choose my endings is based on the okay, so I'm speaking as somehow based on the characters themselves. So I've planned the series as 4 books. I don't expect every ending to be the same. For me, it has to
Hmm.
feel right for the characters and the people that I have created them to be and shown the readers to be. So whether that looks like okay, there is a promise to see where this goes and try it out and see if it works, or if there's a yeah, we're going to elope and run off and get married or whatever. Although I haven't written that kind of ending yet, but yeah, I think it's gonna differ for me. I don't think I'm going to have um the exact same ending for every book I write. Because who knows? I can write a book where the characters decide in the end to elope or get married or anything like that. So yeah, I don't think I'm leaning more towards one or the other as a writer or as a reader because I read books where there's a full proposal happening at the end. A baby is on the way, all kind of things are going on by the end of the book. And then there are those people who they haven't even views yet, but there is like the hope that okay, they are working towards this, they are committed, at least for now, see where it goes and how it unfolds. So yeah, I kind of both. I don't prefer one or the other.
It sounds like you're keeping the options open for wherever the books take you. And what I certainly expect will happen is that in the next two books in the series, we're going to see characters we've seen before in the first two books in a whole different light, which, as a romance reader, is one of my favorite things to encounter. The sense that the writer has worked hard to build a world where all these people interact as we do in real life, and then you get the chance to see these couples, and in this case, these Trinidadian Caribbean couples really figuring each other out. So, a cheeky question now is if you have any
Mhm.
tiny spoilers to share with us about book three or four, I would love to hear them.
Well, I wouldn't talk about book four yet. It's kind of far away. I mean, I know who book four is going to be about already because when I'm planning anything as a series, I decide, okay, these are the people who are going to be featured as the main characters in the book. So, book three's couple. Should I say who it is? I mean, if you've read both books, you've already met them. I mean, I don't really think it's a secret or anything because you kind of see their relationship unfolding as the story goes. So, yes, book three is about Maxie and Remy. If you've read the books, you know who they are. They're very, they have relationships with both the main characters from Sweet Han as well as Don't Go Breaking My Heart. So I am currently writing. I don't have a release date. I'm still hoping to release it next year, but I'm still writing the book. So we'll see. Of course, I will provide my updates along the way. Um, but as of now, I'm still writing it, and there's no release date yet for book three.
This is very exciting. I mean, the fact that we're going to meet these people again in this profoundly thrilling way. It's kind of like it's the best kind of productive macroing. It's like macroing with no moral ill consequences because
I I like that. I love how you said that. It is. It really is. It really is. So yes, yes, yes. I agree with that. I agree with that.
I think the last question I'll ask you before I invite you to do your second reading has to do with the way you write women and their sexual agency across books, particularly Reba in Don't Go Baking My Heart. Now, without giving too much away, it's clear to me, and then this is one of the things I really appreciated about both books, and particularly about this one, is that the female protagonists have a really strong relationship to their own sexual freedom, knowing what they like as sexual, sensual people, and knowing what they would like to receive from their prospective or current lovers. Now, was it important for you to write Trinidadian woman in this way?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because, I always want to be, no matter what personality the women in my books have, I want to show them having agency, showing how consent is important to the characters. As we say in romance, consent is sexy. So yeah, and that was very important. I just want to show these women they know what they want, they know what they don't want. Um, they're not shy about saying what they want or what they don't want, even though Reba and Sharice are very different characters, right? Their personalities are so different, but I kind of want to keep that element basically the same throughout. They are strong, but they have vulnerable sides, and they do show that as well. But when it comes to their partners, they don't shy away from what it is they want to say. Just that maybe Reba might be more vocal than Trace in getting her point across. but they have a say in what they want and they will tell you in different ways.
Which is really refreshing and exciting to see in romance writing coming out of our region that is reaching both international readers as well as readers at home. Because, as we said, the way in which you shape Caribbean men to have complex, rich lives. You do the same thing for Caribbean women, while understanding that while the gender binary can be limiting, that there are certain ways in which men and women in the Caribbean have been socialized, have
Mhm.
had their lives politicized, and that these things also matter in the world of romance because they are a part of how we love each other and how we're taught to love each other.
Yep, so true.
I think that is a great segue to invite you to share your second reading with us from Don't Go Baking My Heart.
All right. So I chose chapter two from Reva's point of view for my second reading because if you get to see a bit of Devon, it's only fair you get a sense of who Reba is as a character. Right. Here we go. Reba prided herself on being professional most days. Well, she made an attempt simply because she liked her current boss. Her varying hair color choices weren't seen as professional by some. Before she started working with Sharif, she had ventured into the corporate world. Big mistake, and so not for her. But the need to ensure her independence, even while living with her parents, did add a level of desperation at times. Plus, all her fun clothes and wigs weren't going to suddenly appear without money. Those corporate jobs had placed so many restrictions on the staff that had her itching to leave many times until she had finally decided enough was enough. Besides, most of the execs had acted as if being an assistant meant they could treat her like shit. She had grown tired of the disrespect, emailed her resignation, and never returned. She hadn't minded burning that entire bridge down because she didn't plan to go back ever. Leaving that place had been her best decision to date. She didn't have to give a damn what those people thought anymore. Cherise didn't have an issue. Reba could wear a damn rainbow on her head for all her boss did. But she lost herself for a moment when the text came in and blurted out, "Oh shit." Reba fumbled her phone, nearly sending it skating across the floor towards the pool. She caught it before it went anywhere near the ground or water, heart pounding. That was life, and she kept track of everything for her job. The death by watery grave would have had her in tears. She would have had to slash her makeup and hair budgets to buy a new one. As Grace glanced over her, the boss on the other side of the pool with their latest client, who was busy gushing about how she wanted the dessert setup to look. The client had a massive 30th birthday party planned for this weekend, and they were finalizing everything. This booze was some maybe she should try some less weird options, especially since this woman had children who'd be running around at the party, but she wasn't here yet. Really like that. Reba supposed a cake that could cost a cool couple $1,000s wasn't a big deal for this lady. Ah, to be rich and wanting what you wanted, regardless of knowing there was potential destruction in the item's future, must be nice. Either way, Reba was lucky the client didn't hear her curse or was ignoring it. Hell, the woman probably didn't even remember Reba was there. She was used to these types ignoring the assistant because, of course, Reba didn't matter to them. Charisse was the focus. Reba grinned at Charisse and mouthed a sorry before looking back down at the text she'd gotten from Devon King. He'd actually replied. After 2 months of sending him memes and videos, just because she could reply, she didn't know what to make of this. Reba. They're cats, obviously. Devon. I don't know what that means. Reba. Cat's gonna cat, Devon. Don't you see how they're just pushing stuff off the desk? It's such a cat thing to do. Devon. This is funny. Why? Reba eyes. Of course, Mr. wouldn't get it. The tone of Devon glared from her fancy eyes. She almost dropped her phone. What the hell? Who did that? Actually called the person on the phone. Devon King, obviously. Reba shouldn't be surprised. He didn't seem like much of a texter, and in a meager interaction they'd had at the wedding, he had behaved like a crotchety old man. Ashamed, dared venture onto his lawn. She hadn't seen the man since the wedding. Reba wasn't about to forget that of dreams. She remembered how it framed his lush lips perfectly. She wondered if the woman he's actually calling you after leaving you on red had miracles. Two key miracles. Over at Sharice. She was felt that deep and other more inconvenient parts of her body, like between her legs. How dare his voice be this deep and sexy? Shit, were her nipples hot? She was actually wearing a bra, so it wouldn't be too obvious. But one could never be too careful because damn, that voice could make even the strongest padded bra useless. And that is the end of Reba's scene.
It's thrilling to get a chance to see both characters and then to know they're going to meet and meet again and meet in some really exciting, not PG-13 ways, which is something that I love about the books in these series. They don't shy away from intimacy. And what's better about that is that the intimacy never feels gratuitous, it never ever feels forced. Certainly, no one should read these books if they're afraid of sex, but if reading sex on the page makes you squeamish, I would strongly recommend the Island Bite series. It may cure you of some hang-ups you've been having. It has been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you, Natalie, but I can't let you leave before we play this season's special game. As our bios and bookmarks NGC Bocas Lit Fest family knows, we introduce a fun, quirky game for all of our writers that we subject slash treat them to, depending on your definition. This season's game is called Walking to the Revolution, and it envisages this scenario. Your new book, in this case, Natalie's Don't Go Baking My Heart, is on its way to a life changing protest held in honor of the social and political issue closest to your heart. Therefore, Don't Go Baking My Heart is walking hand in hand down the street with two other books by its side, books that are in intense, life changing conversation with it. The question to Natalie is therefore, which two books are those, and why have you chosen them?
Okay, so the two books I chose, the first one is That Could Be Enough by Alyssa Cole, and the second one is Zenny by Rebecca Weatherspoon. And the reason why I chose these two novels is because they show different kinds of queer love. You know, I do have queer characters in my book. Kieran in the first book is bi, and I don't know if people caught on to this in book two, but Reba is also queer. The difference is in book one, Kieran asks that this truth, so he says he's bi, to talk about it. Reba doesn't have a discussion like that. It isn't. overt, but I try to subtly put the hints in there. Some people did tell me they caught it, some people may not have caught it. But that's why I chose these two books because the first one, That Could Be Enough by Alyssa Cole, is actually a FF historical romance. So it's set in 1820. I know I said before I don't read a lot of historical romance, and I'm very selective of the books that I read. But I really love this book because it showcases two black queer women, their love, and it shows the way it's shown is through letters that they write to each other. So Andromeda and Mercy write these letters to each other, and there's just a subtle seduction in the wording, and it's just written so beautifully. And I think this book challenges a lot of ideas that people have that, hey, queer people kind of just sprung up in the 21st century. They didn't exist back in the day, which is, how could you think that? So this is one of the books that challenges that ideas because it's set in 1820, And even though these two women, they can't be very overt about how they're feeling, so they use the letters in to subtly, let each other know, hey. So that's why I chose this one. And Denny also shows queer love, but in a different way. So we have a hero and a heroine, and both of the characters actually identify as bi. Um, and a lot of times, I know there's discussions in the community that how could you say you're still bi if, let's give an example, a woman who says she's bi is in a relationship with a man? People question these things. So in this book, um, you showcase two by MCs. It's a marriage of convenience. The hero is white, the heroine is black, but it's just such a funny, sweet book. Um, and I read multiple types of queer books whereby, okay, there is angst and, there's a struggle about um, my identity. But then I also like reading books where, okay, these characters are just living their lives. It's not about the identity. Even if they're talking about it, that's not the focus. It's really more so what's happening and watching these two people fall in love regardless of their sexuality, basically. So yeah, these are my two books. Um, Alyssa and Rebecca Witherspoon have a very extensive backlist, so people could either choose to start with these books and just devour everything, and they have written other books featuring queer characters as well. So I highly recommend these two books. I think people should go get it, show it some love, hype it up, talk about it, and then just go read everything else that they've written, basically.
Thank you for those selections and for reminding all of us that queer people, both in the Caribbean and around the world, have always existed and did not just spring out of the ground in this century or in the past 5 years. That's very important
Yeah,
for the theme we're
yeah.
discussing today. Natalie, it's been such a joy speaking with you. I hope
Thank
that
you.
viewers who have tuned in to the live stream, viewers who will look at our episode after it's aired, will, if they were skeptical about Caribbean romance before, my fervent hope is that there are now new converts to the church slash temple slash mosque of romance and what it can offer to all of us, particularly in difficult times. I am eagerly awaiting book three, no pressure at all, some pressure, slight pressure. And again, thank you
A
so
little
much
bit.
for your generosity and your insights shared with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me and having me here to talk to you. I had a good time. Yeah, it was fun.
I am glad. So, Bios and Bookmarks viewers, season 8 is not quite at an end yet. We have two more episodes left. Again, as you know, Bios and Bookmarks is proudly powered by the NGC Bocas Lit Fest. It's our deep pleasure to bring these discussions with Caribbean writers both at home and in the diaspora to you wherever you live. So stay tuned for our final two guests. We will return. Until then, take good care of yourselves and each other and continue reading powerful, thrilling, and in this case, sexy Caribbean books. Have a good night, everyone.